And what about intention? See, more and more the scientists are getting to the conclusion that intention can affect and modify the physical realm, but they never talk about emotions. They insist on the intention.
Well, but eventually they will, for this reason. This is a wonderful discussion we're about to have, so just relax. This is really, really a wonderful new place. So it's going to feel like we're off the subject, but we're not. We're right on it. So just hang in there, and it will come round to what you're reaching for. So let's say that rather than scientists, economists are exploring the economic wherewithal of the planet. And they have acknowledged the abundance that is amassed, and they have put mathematical figures to it, and they have concluded that there is a quantifiable mass of wealth that they can describe with some consistent accuracy, they believe. So then they begin approaching this economic pie in terms of who should receive it, who should get pieces of it. And as they split the pie up, there's never enough to go around. And it causes all this feeling of greed and shortage, because they are only quantifying the manifested pile, while there is this whole vortex of creation. There's this whole vibrational pie that they aren't even taking into consideration as they are quantifying what's there. In the same way, the scientists are doing some of the same thing. They're only able to acknowledge, they're only acknowledging what's already manifested. And until they are able to accept the reality of this pre-manifestation as something that is reality, then they will be dissatisfied in their discovery. Now take it a little further. Take it to where you were headed. And
they accept that we are energy. They absolutely accept that.
But they accept it as far as they see it in manifested form.
Because they are scientists. They have to keep the empirical methods prominent, or else they will no longer be scientists. They'll be whacked.
But it is that what is itis that prevents them from exploring. In other words, it's the same thing that we talked about as we began here today. It's like there are those who are creating outside the vortex, and there are those who are creating inside the vortex. And outside the vortex, they are fraught with all kinds of limitations. And then they apply all kinds of effort to their limited life that they have carved out for themselves. And if you were to look at those outside the vortex creators, you would see that those that offer more effort do get more done, and that those that try harder do accomplish more, and that those that offer some intentionality do seem to accomplish more. But they're still the outside the vortex clump of creators. And the inside the vortex clump of creators are creating in a whole other range of creations, you see. You just can't get around it. You've got to come into this intention. Now, if we were standing in any of your physical shoes, our first intentionality would be to line up with the fullness of who we are, to be keenly aware of the emotions that we feel, so that the whole of us is setting forth the intention. And that's what we were talking about earlier when we were talking about the negative emotion, very specific, and then the negative getting more general, and then it being generally positive, and then getting more and more specifically positive. You get some of those scientists beginning to understand, because they've proven it to themselves, the power and value of alignment through their own personal emotional readings, so that these scientists then get into the vortex, knowing what they already know, but knowing so much more, and apply that full vision of source energy to that. In other words, it would seem logical that someone like Esther, who is inside the vortex, could lead them, but they cannot hear her. They cannot hear her because we are talking different languages. And so more and more what's happening is scientists who have the scientific language are emotionally finding their way into the vortex. You heard a man say, I can't believe I'm even here. I can't even believe I'm here today. I'm not telling anyone that I'm here. Esther made Jerry promise that he would tell no one. He didn't keep the promise very well. because here you have found us out. But because Esther knew how she felt about it. In other words, we understand that there's all kinds of reluctance to leave the static, stable, provable, scientific, manifested world. But if no one leaves it, nothing expands. So you know what happens? New babies are born who aren't holding themselves apart. In other words, new generations keep coming forth, springing off. The new generation will hear what Abraham is teaching before they've learned that they shouldn't listen to something like that. And then when they explore their scientific endeavor, they'll explore it from inside the vortex. You see what we're getting at?
Yes, absolutely. I believe that physicists, astronomers, many of the science biologists are getting more and more spiritualist because they understand this is not a solid
because
universe.
They have no way of explaining it otherwise. You just cannot stand in this physical world with you are brilliant, but you have not managed to scrape enough dirt together to launch another planet into orbit. You have to know that there's something more going on. And when you start to personally feel connected to that more that's going on, that's when you discover your empowerment. And that's when you begin to apply yourself. And when you apply intentionality to that aligned connection, then things really begin to move in a wonderful way.
Yes. But my question is, does diet and allopathic drugs have a really big influence on dumbing down people so they cannot just see spiritualism?
There are endless excuses that people can use as their reason for not aligning with who they really are. And that may very well be one excuse.
Excuse, but not like a sure thing. You cannot do it because you're dumb. I mean, I see that a lot, I mean, in just the day-to-day relationship with people.
Well, we are encouraging you to be emotionally aware. And if you are emotionally aware, then at early subtle stages of emotional imbalance, emotional recognition of vibrational imbalance, you can soften the resistant thought, amplify a non-resistant thought.
Oh, I'm okay. I'm talking about the general public.
Come right back into balance. In other words, but as we said earlier, if you aren't aware of those early subtle stages, so you don't do it, don't worry, the resistance becomes more. And the bigger the resistance becomes, the more difficult it is to release it. And so there are a lot of people that rather than releasing resistance, cover it up. They numb it. They change their emotional awareness by utilizing substances that make them not so keenly aware. So the drug takes the edge off rather than the meditation taking the edge off. The drug takes the edge off rather than coming into alignment taking the edge off. So now they get all hyped up. They apply themselves really strongly. They rarely come into alignment. They are utilizing the drug, but the drug is not the enemy and the drug is not the problem. It's the reluctance to accept the emotional integrity and the willingness to discover true alignment with true power that really is the problem.
Definitely.
Okay. Thank you. It's a good time for a segment of lunch. We're enjoying this immensely, are you? Yes. It is fun being out on the leading edge with all of you. Good time for lunch.